Yeah, so there are a lot of things that keep us up at night as a broker, right? So first of all, we are truly struggling to stay on top of all the regulatory changes and new requirements. And this is our business, right? This is our business.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hey folks, we're in for a new show for Simply Trade. Ania, I'm going to probably just destroy your last name. I'm going to take a shot at it, but you know me being the dumb country boy I am. Ania Wierzbowska-Fuller, right?
Very, very close. Very close. And Wierzbowska.
Wierzbowska, okay.
Polish names. No one can pronounce them.
Ania, you are with A. Derringer, and you work with a good friend, Amy Magnus. But A. Derringer is, folks, if you don't know, they are a customs brokerage firm that is involved in a lot. They have a lot of folks with them that are very, very well respected, Ania being one of them. I'm looking forward to this discussion. But why don't you give a brief synopsis here of what is it that you're doing for A. Derringer?
Yes, so I am a director of consulting and regulatory affairs. So I lead a team of trade compliance services. So we are actually three different teams. There's consulting that does a lot of billable projects for our clients. And those billable projects are everything from HTS classification to prior disclosure. So we can do a lot of different things. Then we have a regulatory team, and that team is really mostly focused on making sure that Derringer is compliant with all of the rules and regulations that are coming at us every day. And we also help our clients to be compliant. And we have compliance team who helps with that as well and does a lot of post-entry amendments, like post-summary corrections, protests, and also helps our clients being compliant with all the rules and regulations. So in a nutshell, really, this is the role of my trade compliance services team.
You'd sent out some things preliminary for us, and I love asking this question. You put it in, what keeps you up at night? So it's like in what you were looking at there of what you're seeing from your perspective, what kind of gets you nervous, I guess, as they would say?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that keep us up at night as a broker, right? So first of all, we are truly struggling to stay on top of all the regulatory changes and new requirements. And this is our business, right? This is our business. So how can an importer, Andy, who has a company to run and for whom customs clearance is really only incidental to the company's core business, how can they stay informed about all the changes that are coming at them and how they can be compliant with all the new requirements? It is very, very hard in this environment. And, one of the significant and really impactful requirements that went into effect in the last few years is for importers to intimately know their supply chain. Historically, importers were only concerned maybe with a few layers of their supply chain, right? They needed to know their direct suppliers, of course, perhaps factories. But these days, mostly because of the forced labor, they have to understand every level of their supply chain, down to that proverbial tomato seed. They need to know where the cotton was grown, right? They need to know where the quartz was mined and where the aluminum was smelted. So today, our customers have to also understand consequences of not knowing their suppliers. There's adverse inference, and I think that's a very important concept. CBP will, for example, use adverse inference on forced labor. So as a broker, we, of course, don't need to know our customers' suppliers, but our customers have to, and they have to understand and map their entire supply chain. But CBP is also expecting brokers to know a whole lot more about their customers. So these expectations are applied now in regulations, in CBP's best practices, and various guidance documents. So if you look at this, in the not so distant past, our main concerns from the broker perspective were buyer, supplier, importer. Now we have to make sure that our customers are sourcing responsibly. There's forced labor, there's sustainability, and there are customs broker regulations. Of course, regulations were always there, but they have been modernized in December of 2022. We are required to do more things and know more things. And customs broker regulations, 19 CFR Part 111, require brokers to understand whether our customer is new, for example, or has experience importing, and inform them about their obligations related to importing into the United States. So we are pretty much required to be educators of our customers. And another thing that keeps us up at night, there are also pending regulations. So there's customs broker verification of an importer's identity. We have not seen the final rule yet, but we know we're coming. We are hearing that it may be released in November of this year. And that proposed rule mandates procedures for brokers to verify the client's identity, including periodical updates to POA. So, with that, this is why Deringer, here at Deringer, we are participating in various CBP's pilots like GBI, the Global Business Identifier test. I wanted to take just a second to talk about it because we understand where customs is headed, right, in requiring that we know more about our business partners. And we also encourage our customers' participation in the GBI test, even though it's not mandatory right now. But I think that partaking in such a test can have benefits to importers. It could help them with their supply chain traceability.
All right, and with that, let's stop for a second. So, folks, what's happening here is we're going through. If you are somebody that's in a small company, if you are somebody that's new into the compliance arena and all that, and some of the things we're dealing with, this is one of those areas you need to get up to speed on this GBI or Global Business Identifier, as Ania was saying. What that's doing is kind of like getting a Dun & Bradstreet number for a company. It's a number that's going to be, your company would be registered. So you yourself need to look at participating and registering your company for a GBI so that you're dealing with other countries, companies in other countries. And they'll be asking for that so you can, reciprocate and ask for the same thing. But here's the other thing. Your purchasing department, your sourcing department needs to, part of your vetting process needs to look at including this as part of the requirements. So your customs attorneys or your legal departments in their contracts also, when they're need to be asking for this kind of stuff. So if you're in the import-export compliance arena, I've just mentioned several different areas that you need to be reaching out within your company to say, we need to get up to speed on this GBI. So I would say you yourself need to become proficient in this. And Ania's going to give you a little bit more detail here. But second, you need to take actions to reach out to other parts of your company so that you can incorporate the GBI into your business. When you're dealing with a supplier of goods, a manufacturer, their suppliers, you want their GBI so that it comes in. Ania, if I got a good handle on is that a good synopsis as we're going into this?
Yeah, indeed. It's pretty good synopsis. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer. So you can definitely reach out to me. But basically, in this GBI test, right, CBP chose 3 distinct identifiers to evaluate. And the test is to examine whether those identifiers can become an effective tool in improving government visibility to imports. So they also want to see whether they can improve supply chain traceability. And under this test, so that you mentioned DUN, Data Universal Number System, DUNS number, that's one of them, Andy. And there is the second one is the global location number, GLN, and the legal entity identifier, LEI, is the third one. So CBP is using all three of them because neither of them on its own provides all the data that CBP would like to see. But as a test participant, you do not have to submit all three numbers. Even one would work, right? Although submitting two or more would provide more benefits and would give more information to you, to your company, but also to CBP. So it would be a good idea to use all three numbers if you want to participate in the test. And also just to make sure that's understood, this test doesn't have to apply to all of the imports, right? So it could be really just a part of your import, maybe one specific sourcing scenario or lane that you're more interested in looking into more deeply. So again, you can look at this from the perspective of what would benefit me, what do I want to learn more about my supply chain, which supply scenario I want to use, and then use these numbers with CBP, because CBP is looking for feedback, right, and insight from the test participants.
All right. So with that, I guess the scenario here is taking what you've already got registered. If you know, like a DNB number and these other numbers, you're not having to reinvent the wheel per se. So that's good. So in looking at it again and incorporating this, so you're registered. Okay, fine. You're trying to use this, and you come across somebody that doesn't have one of these numbers yet. What should you be doing or asking then in the midst of this? Should you wait until they do and say you need to get registered with a GBI or what?
Well, I think, this will probably depend on your suppliers. Not everyone will be using the numbers. And again, this is just a test. I think at the end, CBP will determine whether any of these numbers or a combination of these numbers will be something they will want to use. So, but I would talk to suppliers also and see if they could register for some of these numbers, because again, that will provide you more visibility into your supply chain.
All right. Well, it's with that, then let's say that you've got that and you're moving forward. Then what? I mean, is with all the things that were going on, I got to say, you hit on something else. If somebody's registered, you're thinking they're trying to be that good corporate citizen and all that. But as you're going through this, the other thing is you mentioned verifying the supply chain, verifying where these goods and the raw goods are coming from and being where it's manufactured and all that. How do you keep up with that? Hey, I'm just a small company in let's say here in Arkansas and whatnot. It's like, how am I going to keep up with all?
Yeah, I think, Andy, it's a good challenge. It's a great question. And I don't know that I have really a recipe, right, or a perfect answer to this. The sad part about this is that you need to keep up with it, right? That's part of the requirements now of importing into the United States. And it's also important to know your supply chain, because if you don't, you could be bringing something into the United States that is banned, like product that is made with forced labor, right? So it is very hard. I think it's a great challenge to keep up with it. I think it's very important to have procedures. There's a lot of guidance provided by CBP and other organizations, right, on how to keep up with this type of thing and how to trace your supply chain. And working with your suppliers, right, asking questions. And if you work with suppliers and they don't want to answer your questions or they don't want to provide clear information, then you may want to consider just not working with them anymore. I think I know it's sometimes not as simple as that, but I think that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, how do you keep up with everything then? Is like, even from your perspective, there's so many different regulations and all of that. What sources do you use, or how do you, I mean, there's only so much a person can read. I mean, what are you going to do? and keep up with all this?
Again, it's a very difficult question too. I think, one of the things that you can and should do as an importer for sure is to really develop partnership with your customs broker, right? So developing partnership with your customs broker, I think, is the best way to achieve, or one of the best ways, maybe not the best way, but one of the best ways to achieve customs compliance and to really understand what is needed, right? That true partnership will go beyond the legal obligation. A broker who is really a good partner will be engaged with you and will be able to really get to know your industry, will be able to get to know your importation, and may be able to really help you with different things, right? Most brokers serve many clients and they have valuable industry knowledge. So if you have a good partnership with your broker, the broker will know your industry, will know your import. The broker will be able to send you warnings, identify trends, give you heads up about CBP's target enforcement. If that true partnership is formed, I think the broker is on the lookout for you and will inform you about new requirements you have to meet and issues you could expect. However, I just want to point it out. You should not entirely rely on your broker to do that, right? Please remember that understanding import requirements is the importer's responsibility. So that partnership can help, and I think you should meet and talk to your broker and form the trusted partnership. But at the same time, you need to do your homework, right? You need to understand your responsibilities. You need to understand that as an importer, you have to demonstrate reasonable care and meet your obligations, right? And you need to read. You need to read and understand what changes are coming. So I would recommend subscribing to different publications, whether it's International Trade Today or publications from legal companies. Here at A.N. Derringer, we also send trade alerts to our customers. So signing up for our trade alerts helps to really stay informed and understand what changes. I think all these things are very important.
All right. And so that's something right there, folks, utilizing most, probably 99% of companies out here are using a customs broker for their import transactions. And, you also have export, your freight forwarders and all that. Along that lines, those freight forwarders and brokers, they're having to keep up to speed. They've got more resources trying to, look at the regulations and the Federal Registry notices and things of that nature. I would say that you need to leverage your relationship with your broker. Ania, you just mentioned it. It's like, get with your broker. Well, that means you need to talk with them, and more than just bidding on a contract or services. It's like, let's step back here for a minute. If you are successful, your broker is going to be successful, and they'll do everything they can to help empower you with the right knowledge and all of that. So they can summarize a lot of good things that are going on that are hot buttons. And if you need to get involved with an issue, that's another thing that gets that's good, where you can look at trade associations, and your broker can not only are there the Brokers Association, the National Customs Broker and Freight Forwarders Association, NCBFAA, that they're involved in, but your broker can make recommendations as to what trade associations that may be apropos to you to help deal with an issue, because your company may not want to be the main issue or main company out there on the front lines. You can go behind a trade association and they can talk on behalf of the membership. Well, that's what that's for. But you need to get involved to affect change. And that's something where I would say on the regulatory affairs front is the more associations that get together to align on an issue, the more, I guess, impact you're going to have, and hopefully positively make changes for the better, or a defensive posture where somebody's proposing regulations that you know is going to be detrimental to your company and the importing or exporting community, and you have a shot at getting that changed, right, Ania?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And Derringer, we are very heavily involved with associations, right? And we're kind of on the forefront. We always review new proposed regulations, and we advocate for change when necessary. We also advocate for our clients. So, when we see issues in importing or something that is becoming a trend, we will communicate those issues directly with CBP through customs committees, whether with NCBFAA or organizations like Connect or Northern Border Brokers Association, right? So we have people involved in all of these organizations, and we just affect the change too, all the time. And that also gives us access to information early on. So we are informed, and we are available to help with questions.
Excellent. Well, and that's the other thing is that the newsletters is what I was trying. I just went blank on trying to figure what's
right, like the
term
trade alerts, newsletters. Yes.
True. Yeah, folks, that's one of the things that you're trying to keep up with everything, and you can subscribe to multiple things. But I would highly recommend that, especially with your customs broker, if they're putting out a newsletter and trade alerts, that you use that as your first primary source. And then you can follow up with other things, because you can't keep up with everything. I'm telling you, man, I'm dumb as a box of rocks. I got to get and look at people that are smarter than me, and they write the articles and all that. And so that's great. So then I get up to speed on something. And then the scenario there is, hey, I need to know a little bit more on this particular issue. Now, I don't have to look at everything. I look at what's apropos to me. I keep using that word for some reason today. It makes me sound smart, I guess. But as I go through, it's like what's appropriate, I guess, or what's near and dear. So to that point, that's where I guess I'm going in, and I'm looking at it where it will show you where to look. A newsletter is not going to be your final source, but it's going to tell you and give you some things up and bring you up to speed. But then it gives you, hey, where do I need to look? I need to look a little bit more on, we were talking about the de minimis. We're talking about, the entries, the entry quality, the things that are going on there. There's the export administration is getting a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess aggressive in enforcement. So all those things that come into play, and that's is a key factor. But here's something else. Ania, when you're dealing with your clients and then all of that, all right, do you bring them up to speed on issues and things of that nature? But then there's a thing that I always come back to say, okay, this is good information, but what do I do with it? And that's where you need to come back around and I guess look at it as to, is there a regulation that's going to affect part of my operations and things? Do I need to update my procedures? And if I update my procedures, then you have, what most people are calling the SOPs or standard operating procedures. Like, okay, that's a living document. Don't let it just draft it and let it sit there, right?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. It's very important to have SOPs, right? But also very important to understand that you have to make updates, and you may have to change your processes depending on what's going on. From the broker's perspective, Andy, we want to make sure that we are aware of any changes, but we also inform our clients. So, for example, there are a lot of changes that are coming to 301, the duties on goods from China, right? So we are looking at reports. We are pulling reports from our system. We are looking for clients that may be affected, especially if their duties will increase. We also want to be able to let our clients know of any exclusions they may be able to utilize. And again, this is not 100% bulletproof, right? But that's type of analysis we are doing internally for our clients, in addition to trade alerts. So I completely agree with you that if you're working with your broker, if you have a broker and the broker has trade alerts, sign up for those. Because what we try to do is to really synthesize this vast amount of information that is out there that can be very overwhelming, and really focus on the key points that can affect our customers, right? Like with 301 duties on September 27th, tariffs on a lot of goods from China will be increasing. And it's important for importers to know that, because they may be affected, right? If you import electric vehicles, EV batteries, solar cells, face masks, needles, syringes, minerals, or steel and aluminum, your duties will go up, right? And there will be additional increases in January of next year and January of 2026. So some of these duty rates are very high. If you remember, they started with like 15 and 25%. Now they go up in some instances to 100%. So it's important to know, and it's also important to know that there is an exclusion process that was announced with this latest announcement on September 13. So for non-solar industrial equipment, but every importer will have to apply for an exclusion, and those opposing the exclusion will have an opportunity to express their views. So obtaining an exclusion is a process and will take time. But these are the type of things to be aware of, because they are constantly changing, right? And they may affect your imports, and you don't want to be surprised.
Well, and to that point is that as we're looking at it, I guess there's also another element that of all the things you're looking at and what we've talked about is also you've got to inform your peers, but also upper management. So in looking at that and with all the things you've just talked about, what do you have any suggestions for somebody on how to inform upper management without, getting the deer in the headlight look, kind of like you've overwhelmed them?
Yeah, upper management is always probably mostly concerned about ROI, right? So there's compliance aspect that is always really difficult to monetize, but so critical, because how can you really put an ROI on avoiding penalties or delays, right? You can, but it's really hard. Now with additional duties and requirements like that, that really hits your bottom line. So the cost of your goods, imported goods, may increase if you are hit with additional duties, and you definitely want to know that upfront. The same with anti-dumping, right? There are so many new anti-dumping and countervailing orders. And again, it's important to know if there are new orders that may be applicable to your product, because that will increase your cost of goods. So you can always go at this from that perspective, right? What's happening and how does this really affect the duties, the amount of duties, and the cost of goods that I'm importing? And do we need to make a change in our strategy to import, our sourcing strategy? So I think that's kind of one way you can approach it. But also, I think upper management should be aware of importers' obligations. We see so many times importers who get in trouble with CBP because they don't understand their obligations. And at times they really rely too heavily on their brokers. They think that their broker will be able to handle everything and will know everything about their imports. And that's not true, right? The broker has to rely on the documentation and information provided from the importer, because the broker never sees the shipment, right? The broker does not know what's in the box. So informing, upper management about those obligations is important too.
Well, and here's something else that it comes into play, in my opinion, is that it is very important to have good descriptions and all that. But, when customs is wanting, the brokers and holding them accountable, the broker doesn't know what's in the box. Your supplier could have provided something. You're an importer and they could have put something in there they're not supposed to. But all said and done, there's an expectation where, all right, the broker should be opening up these boxes, look to see what's in there. Well, I'm sorry, we don't have the authority to do that. That's customs job, not ours. So in that scenario, when we start looking at it, that's why it's even more important to make sure that you as a company and being an importer, you vet or you check out extensively who you're doing business with and who they're doing business with. And you don't need to do this solely on your own. You need to do it with the purchasing and sourcing folks, the IT folks, the other elements of your company. So, folks, as we start going through it and we're looking at this is one of those where, to me, I always say this is where the rubber meets the road. We've talked about, due to the supply, the forced labor regulations, you need to know your supply chain. Well, to know your supply chain takes a relationship with the people you're doing business with. That takes time to develop. That takes time to check things out. If you've got some red flags, don't ignore them. This GBI, the Global Business Identifier, that's a good thing because it's hopefully going to streamline things with not only as you're dealing with people and your companies, but as you're selling your goods. I mean, I guarantee you that the AEO requirements over in Europe, this would be one of those positive things that you're already ahead of the ball game with some of that. So I don't know. I'm just looking at it across the board, but there's no doubt there's always a lot of things going on in the industry.
Definitely. And Andy, I'm glad you mentioned product descriptions because they are very important and actually they are often a nightmare, right? And they contribute to CBP holds and incorrect entries. So sometimes one of the easiest things importer can do to minimize customs holds is providing a good description of imported goods. And if you think about this, right, your broker is also one of the broker's responsibilities to verify information the broker receives from an importer. But your broker can even conduct HTS straight face test if you don't provide detailed description of your product on the commercial document. So that's one element that seems very simple, but it's really critical.
Well, I could tell you all said and done, though, is that the alliance with your broker is so important from a compliance perspective, but also bringing your broker in for a quarterly business review so that not only can you look at the services that a broker's doing, but also give the broker representatives a chance to bring you and your team up to speed on, hey, here's what's going on. This is something you need to be looking at and aligning with, the efforts. I think that is something that is so important and is so missed. People, they're in their own little world. It's like, man, bring in people. You don't have to be the only voice. Have somebody else come in and talk about it. What do you think about that?
Oh, I completely agree, right? When you think about developing this effective partnership with your customs broker, communication, it's critical. Getting to know each other, open channels of communication are critical elements in developing that partnership. I completely agree that you should have reviews with your customs broker. So first of all, really that relationship should be somewhat structured, right? So you have your POA that allows you to set up the relationship and authorizes your broker to process entries. But then there are terms and conditions that are very important. These are your ground rules. How will you hold each other accountable? How will you resolve disputes? And once this is all set on the high level, it would be still meaningless without an SOP. So Andy, you mentioned SOPs a few minutes ago, but I think having a documented standard operating procedures with your broker is really, really critical, right? You need to, each party needs to be crystal
you're part
clear.
Of it. Right. You're going down the road. The broker plays a key role, but it's also people within your company.
Absolutely.
And your supply, they're sending information to who? Your broker, right. Or they're sending it to you. Don't sit on it. They need that information timely and things of that nature, right?
Like you and your broker have to be crystal clear on who does what and how both parties meet their contractual and compliance obligation. That's just the bottom line.
Not only who does what, but when they do it and to whom they send it to, kind of thing.
So yes, so that SOP is critically important, and then you have to have business reviews, right? Meet with your broker periodically. Quarterly is a good cadence. When you meet with your broker, discuss performance. It is good to have KPIs, right? Some key performance indicators established upfront, so you know what you're focused on. But discuss your satisfaction. How are things going for each party? Are there problems? Talk about solutions and areas where improvement is needed. But I would say don't wait for a business review to communicate and resolve day-to-day issues, right? Do that as they occur and work together to improve process if necessary. Don't wait 3 months to inform your broker about some problems. That's not very effective.
Well, I can tell you that the other thing is that in the spirit of continuous improvement and quality assurance, all those, you don't want to wait for a quarterly review. But on the same token, as you're dealing with things, when you get together, that's one of the things I guess I always challenge. When I would challenge my staff, I would challenge the companies I would work with when I was consulting and all that. Is you bring in people from different areas. And again, purchasing, operations, warehousing, compliance, IT, all these different entities, customer service. And I would look at it and say, we need to look at the whole process and take a lane segment, let's say, of a specific product and or specific lane and say, are there any areas where we can reduce cycle times? So instead of saying, well, we just want to make things better, and everybody was just sitting there and like, well, all right, no, the question is, how can we reduce cycle times? I would like to reduce 2 days out of this process that may be 15 days long. How can we do that? Well, we can get an hour here. We can get 4 hours over here. We can do this, whatever the case may be, so that even to the point where when the shipment is finally, it leaves the factory, comes in, it gets cleared. There's no clearance delays. It gets through and gets delivered. It's timed out to where on the delivery, it goes immediately into inventory and is processed appropriately versus comes in and sits an extra day or two, then is put on the shelves. Those kinds of things. How can we work together so that, hey, we've got something coming. Now, warehouse, be ready. You got to have folks on the schedule for the receiving dock or whatever the case may be. I just that's one of those things that reducing cycle times is a big thing, but that's also one where people, when you get them together, enables them to focus without getting defensive.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I think, everything can be discussed during those conversations if there is an open dialogue, right? One of the things we sometimes struggle with some of our clients, I must say, is lack of responsiveness, right? So I think it's really important to not only establish those expectations from very beginning, and the expectations, especially that your broker will come to you for questions, because you don't want your broker to make assumptions on your entry. But be reachable and responsive to your broker's questions, and also expect same responsiveness from your broker. And I think one other thing, Andy, I think that would help is really from the importer's perspective, understand what your broker needs to process your entry fast and without problems. Because if you understand that and can provide that information to the broker, correct information, right? That's critical. Your entry will be submitted smoothly, and that cycle process will be definitely improved.
I love it. And with all that, I just that, folks, as we've looked through this, we're going to have Ania's contact information with Ann Derringer and all that with our show notes and all. But this is one of those things that I'm hoping that as you look at this, it's going to stimulate some thoughts. It's like we've covered quite a few different things, but in looking at it, it's just, again, something where our hope is that you're now going to be empowered with what's the action you should be taking today. Look at how you're staying up to speed on and up to date, I guess, with things. Get with your brokers and their newsletters and all that. Look to see if there are regulatory affairs agenda items that your broker could help you out with, or something that you need to become proficient in. That means you need to be up to speed, and how you're going to communicate to upper management those types of regulatory affairs issues that, hey, this is, an issue that we need to be informed on and get involved with. And here's why. Here's the impact. Don't just say, well, it's a big deal. No, what's it mean? We are at risk for this in China, or we're at risk at this for our goods being commingled or our cotton being commingled in the manufacturing process. How do you deal with that? Whatever the case may be. And then, finally look to see whatever's going on from a, regulatory affairs that's come down the pipe that has changed regulations. What procedures or your standard operating procedures need to be updated, and go from there. That's just scratching the surface, man. We've gone. But Ania, any final thoughts here? We could keep going. I love talking with you. You're so sharp and all. But is there anything else that you want to add to what I've just said here?
I think you summarized it really pretty well, Andy. I think it's really important to partner with your broker to stay on top of what's coming. And you're absolutely right when you said that, if you don't understand your supply chain, if you don't form partnerships with your suppliers and don't understand with whom you do business, not only your cost may increase, but your product may not be even allowed entry into the United States. Or in the least, you will encounter some high fees for storage because it will take months maybe to resolve an issue. But today, there are so many requirements, and I think it's really, really critical that you understand what's required of you as an importer when you want to import into the United States, and you partner, you take experts as partners to develop, your supply chain mapping, to put together a compliance program with SOPs and best practices, and you stay on top of updating those best practices and procedures when needed as things change.
I love it. Folks, if you also have your executive management that by chance listens to some things, this may be something that you need to, your takeaway here is putting something together on, hey, this is something that they need to be involved in and look at occasionally. So, Ania, once again, thank you so much for everything that you've just, in this discussion. It's very stimulating. I love it. And I hope that we can do this again here in the near future. As we go through and then look at, we didn't really get into the details, for example, on the de minimis. That is a big hot button right now, and the brokers are looking at it and a few others, and I've got some opinions on it to where I think there are companies that should be supplying resources to customs to process these de minimis shipments rather than just showing up, here's a printout or something and said they just want to clear it. So we'll get into that at some point.
Yeah, that's an important topic. I think it will change. What's happening right now is not sustainable, right? And there is this recent administration call for Congress to act on it this year. So we will see changes very soon on the minimum, Andy.
Thank you so much, Ania. All said and done, I hope you have a great day. And this is Andy Shiles with Simply Trade. And y'all have a great day.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.